I'm Rick from Car Thieves Classic Cars. On this video, we're back on this 70 Challenger RT. If you haven't seen it, please go back and check out the other videos, the introduction, and how we got to this point on the car. We're in the process of removing all the old rusted metal, and we're working from the base of this car, from the frame rails and everything brand new, working our way up, and then we're getting to the part you see right now where we're gonna start working on the firewall, the upper cowl, and some other pieces, the door skins, and trying to get this center of the car looking like brand new metal and starting to come together, and you start seeing the ultimate goal. I did do off camera since the last video the rocker patch down here. It was pretty simple, straightforward, using an English wheel on it and just patching that up, making it look pretty decent. Now, saying that, the rocker is going to be behind the quarter panel, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I think I'm happy with it. We don't have to metal finish it out. In general, it's pretty good. I do have some repairs that we're going to have to address on these side pillars, both sides. You can see the other side. There's a really bad patch that someone else did before us that, you know, what we're trying to do is make sure that nothing stands out in the car. There's nothing wrong with patching the car, but we don't want to, when you look at it, say, oh yeah, there's obviously been work here, here, and here. That's the idea behind this car. So you're going to see some of that. We got a couple spots down here we got to do. We have to do the full, it's not a full rocker. We're going to do most of the rocker on the passenger side, and you're going to see how we're going to weld it in without disturbing and pulling the whole entire rocker out. There's just some areas that I didn't think it was feasible to rip everything out of it. We are going to start by stripping the panels that we have, the brand new parts, down to bare metal for the most part. We're going to get them ready to be epoxy primed. Hopefully on this video everything will be epoxy. I'm going to show you how we also, once we remove this old firewall that was holding everything together and spacing out the windshield previous videos and jigging up our floor pan, now that we don't need that anymore, we're going to remove that. We're going to get this area prepped down, like I said, by fixing these side areas that are all rusted out. And then once we install the new firewall, I'm going to show you how we go about sealing up the new one so we don't have to worry about the rust showing up like this car did since water gets in here. And then same thing, it's going to be a similar process up here when we start doing all the repairs, how everything's sealed in epoxy, where Mopar would not have done this because they were more of a budget friendly car and trying to cut costs where they could, and they didn't care about the longevity of these cars. Obviously times have changed and these cars are highly sought after and people really do love them, including myself. So we're going to try to take care of them and preserve them as best we can. So stay tuned. We're going to start grinding, taking down the parts right now to bare metal. We're going to come back, start stripping down this firewall, and then we're going to just start welding parts at it. It's going to be hopefully a fast-paced video. We're going to get a lot done in the process and what parts I decide that around here that I want to put on first on this puzzle on building this pretty much adult-sized model. So stay tuned and let's get to building. If you've seen the previous videos on this car, you'll know a lot of this process is just repetitive. You know, we take the new part out, we strip it down to bare metal, we're going to add the weld-through primer and just get it all prepped. I mean, I want to show it on each video, a little bit of it. We're not going to focus on the direct details. I might just throw little tidbits here and there, so the ones that have watched the whole series, especially if you're watching this in order, you get the idea. So what we're going to do, this is the rocker patch. You could see it was a full rocker. I held it up to the car. We're basically keeping the areas of the rocker under the door jamb and the rear door jamb, and then the rocker is going to butt weld to those areas. We're not going to disturb them. They seem pretty solid and they're very usable, and it kept a lot of structure in the car, not taking the whole rocker panel out that wasn't all rusted out. So I was able to just patch it right between the rusted areas of the rocker and then mostly the back where it's all gone. What that also allowed us to do was really, you could see when we start installing this, getting the rocker panel all sprayed with epoxy very evenly, because now we can spray right on the inside also with sandblast. And where on the other side I basically just sprayed up in there and hope for the best. I mean, I added a lot on the other side. Same thing with the blaster. I did run the blaster through it and then washed it out very clean, but we still were hopeful that it all came out really well. With this now, I'm taking the Firewall. I'm using the Eastwood SCT. Again, this was done on previous videos. All the big, long areas that I can just strip down and use this. I think this tool is the most efficient. What I'm using right here is the same thing. It's the strip-in disc. There's a purple one and a green one. I just buy them off Amazon, and I'm using this on electric grinder. And what that's going to allow me to do, it's the same thing as a strip-in drum, but I can get in better areas. What we're trying to do here, I want to reiterate this, is we're basically trying to get as much of the E-coat off as possible. The reason is I don't trust the E-coat as much. It doesn't give the superior water protection that the epoxy primer does. So if we don't get everything off, the epoxy should hold what's on. If we're sanding over this and it's still not coming off with the DA and our strip-in disc and everything else, well, that area is probably okay. But you see on this car we got about 95-98% of it off. There's a couple areas that when we're running over a DA just are going to be scuffed up and ready for the epoxy. What I'm also doing after this, I don't think I showed it in any of these videos, after the DA process is done, I'm going over with a red Scotch-Brite just to get those fine areas and the areas that the flat DA can't get either. You can see I also did the same thing with the upper cowl panel. We're just stripped it down. I did both sides again, taking the DA, running over everything. And this is also really good because I have to prep a quarter of this panel anyway and all the edges for welding, so really this isn't that much extra work. You can see the area where the wiper motor is going to go on this E-body in the center that's still black. That's where I'm going to have to go up in there with the red Scotch-Brite and really just get by hand. So that's going to be the next step. I didn't show it, but that's what the process is. So when that goes on, that'll be stripped down. What I didn't show on camera also, I stripped down both of the door skins that we're going to install on this video just for the time's sake, but it was the same process. The strip and drum, the DA sander, again the edges with the belt sander, and the surface prep disc on 120 grit sandpaper. What I'm doing right now, like I said, I'm going to remove the old Firewall. The process on this is the same when we strip down the whole car on video too. We're going to cut out the excess material, the major structure in this, with the cutoff wheel. What that's going to allow us to do is really then go back through and peel up the edges and drill out the spot welds, or just use the air chisel. And you see now that there's not a structure running across it, those areas separate a lot easier. What I'm doing right here, you can see I'm removing both the upper cowl and the lower Firewall at the same time. Now the upper cowl was cut out a while ago on a couple previous videos, but this is easy enough that we're just going to remove them both at the same time. Also off camera, I did repair those side door jamb pillars. You can see our patch on the bottom, and I basically run a whole strip up the one side. I also repaired the top window channels with the shrinker stretcher and just work the curb because that area was all eaten up. When we get done with this project, I want pretty much the A pillars down to be good. What I'm going to do right now, we're going to install the Firewall for the final time and get it ready for actual welding. This is actually the second time this Firewall's been in the car, so if it looks like it goes together pretty easy, just know I did work and I bent it and kind of worked it a little bit more, that it looks easier on camera, but all in all the parts do fit really well. I did on the first time use a monkey on the stick above where the brake master cylinder would be, and I yanked it down to where the master was. I didn't have to do that this time because it seemed like it took the shape better because it sat on the car for a day and a half while I was working on our project. So what I'm going to do right here, I did screw in down by right under the windshield to make sure we're clamped up really good and our windshield channel is on track. I'm taking a ratchet strap and I'm basically hooking it up to the heater where the heater motor goes, and out there wrapping around, just pulling that side down. I also did sometimes hook up where the electrical bulkhead connector goes and pull both sides down. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to make sure the hump's centered on our floor pan hump. That's why I'm pulling one direction or the other. That's going to determine how your firewall's sitting, etc., etc. What I do then, I'm focused mostly on clamping in the center on the hump and working my way out. Now that I'm prying up with the monkey on the stick, what I'm doing, I'm trying to get the floor pan back up because it's just sitting a little bit too low on the inside. The idea is you want the inside of the floor pan to match up with the firewall. You know, our original one was in the right location, so naturally we want this one to go back to that since the floor pan fit up so well with that one. So now that everything's verified and test fitted, you see I'm going to start welding this process. I'm using the spot welder, so what you would do in this, you would put a bunch of rosette holes down this whole channel anywhere that I'm spot welding. Obviously we're going to use this tool because it's more productive, it makes things faster, and I think it looks better. So just be aware that there is a little bit more work and prep work as you're doing the panel if you don't have one of these spot welders. You can see I do keep looking in there, making sure nothing's moved as we're taking the clamps off. I'm starting in the center of this firewall and I'm working my way out. What that's going to do, you don't want to start on the outsides and be working towards the center. And I know it's clamped, overly clamped most of the time, but it would just stink if you miss something and you're pushing metal together. It's better push that excess material out instead of pushing it together and then having to weld at the very edge. There's a hump in the middle that's going to stand out so far, where if that did happen on the corner or something, you could slice the corner and just work it, and it's not too bad. So I always do the bottom first on these firewalls. To me, I think it just looks better, works out better. It holds, it's easier to get to, and then just working up, just pulling up, same thing with the excess. I think it just, the process seems to work for me. I get everything lined up, and that's what I like to do. If you want to start on the top, I don't really see a problem why it wouldn't be, but you can see I'm working my way up the edges now, and like I said, I did do all those new channels on the side. So once we get our seam seal and everything done in here, you're never going to know. It's going to look like a factory pair. And then now that I did those, I MIG welded the new edges on there, and then my spot welder runs all the way down, and actually you'll see the spot welds from the one side from factory, and it's easier now that we did all that. You could just MIG weld it right up to it. I don't see a problem with that, but like I said, for this car it's a little different. We're going back through with the MIG welder on the areas that we can't get the back of the spot welder, basically. So I had to drill the holes, just going to run the MIG rosette holes in it, and then now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start priming the inside of all the panels we stripped. The reason behind this is, yeah, I could spray up in the door skins, the inner areas, once they're on the door frames itself, but realistically, if I tape off the areas that we know we're going to have to fold over, we're going to have to weld on as far as this firewall, I could sit there and I could spray a very clean, even 2 coats of epoxy primer on all these areas, getting the sections that you normally wouldn't be able to reach very well. And then you can see even on the firewall, I have it taped everywhere we're going to put our MIG holes, and then beforehand I went through with the weld through primer, and that's what's under there. So everything, as you could see right here, is prepped out right where the cowl panel is going to go. Everything sealed up underneath. I did also put seam sealer on the vents. Go back, there's another video I've done on these Challengers on the upper cowl panel where I seam seal it just to make sure that's all covered too. But everything on the inside of these panels are sealed up. I did check our measurements, checking the height of the firewall. I'm not going to give that because that's a reference off my jig and how high I have the car on it. We're working the firewall. I like to do the brake master holes first, and then again working out around and then kind of up at the window channel. What I'll do with the rest of this car that's bare metal, we'll come back through and I'll epoxy the outside and everything all at one time, so give it that smooth transition. That's why I stopped right at the areas of the firewall with the weld through primer, so I don't have to seal over other epoxy. We get one clean coat and everything should look really well. We would have had to do, if we did the whole firewall all the way down, we would have had to do half the cowl panel and everything, where I think this just makes it a smoother transition. I would say I've seen people, you know, base coat, clear coat the inside of these panels beforehand, and this would be like a similar process. If you want to take this car to that extreme level that everything is even coat, base coat, clear coat, all painted inside, outside. This is how I would do it, is the same process with taping up the cowl panel. So we haven't had one in the shop that wants that yet, but I guess down the road, you know, there's always that, well, there's another step to make it even better. At what point do you compromise and say, okay, this is good? I don't want to say good enough, but this is far superior than anything that this car really even needs. And I'm okay with that. I mean, I think you should be too, that knowing how bad these cars rust on the inside of the cowl panel, it's kind of a no-brainer to put something that's going to seal it off and stop the rust. So saying that, we're on the back to the actual welding part. We're going back on the upper cowl, and you see this is the same process with the spot welder I'm doing with the MIG welder. I'm pushing down, I'm working from the center, working my way outside. Then I'm going to transition over to the spot welder, and I'm going to work our way up the channels, because the spot welder is able to get there. And what's nice, I really do like this on all this upper window channel, the spot welder will go down the whole thing. So I'm working my way in the center, and it does save a lot of time, and I think it looks so cool with the spot welder, seeing all the factory spot welds around the whole window like you would factory. To me, that takes the job just to the next level. And yeah, it's covered by the window and, you know, the gasket for the windshield, the sealant for the windshield, but still, to this point in the metal phase, it just makes the job look so high-end and professional, how it's done, and the spot welds look so clean. And then there's not a lot of prep time on this then, and I think it also helps prevent rust in the future, because you don't have any pinholes where in the MIG weld, you know, you have some impurities, especially if you're welding on old metal, where you can get impurities, and that's where rust can form inside the MIG holes, where this is a very clean, you know, resistance weld. You can see I'm working my way down. I got my clamps on the edge. I did work, you know, with the MIG holes all the way up already, so that area should be good to go. We're going to go back through now that we verified everything's welded, and we'll go through with the belt sander. This is 80 grit on a belt sander. I'm just easily touching it up and smoothing everything out for the most part, just to make everything look smooth. Now, what I'm going to do, you're going to see in a minute, this car is a little different. You know, the owner specifically said he wanted this car to appear factory as best we can. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through with the spot welder with the single side. It's not a structural weld, so I can't use it to hold panels together here. But what we can do, we can go through and basically fake the funk. You know, we're going to go through, hold the spot welder on it, and then that's going to simulate like there's a spot welder. It's not that we're trying to trick anyone. We just don't want, you know, first thing you do when you pop one of these hoods, if you see a completely smooth upper cowl, you know it's been replaced. So this is kind of just going to make it look like, to the majority of the people, that the car hasn't been worked on and it's almost a survivor. And we're trying to tribute that and replicate that as best we can. So you can see right now I'm just holding it down, and I'm just squeezing the trigger, and we're putting a single side spot weld on it. This is good for door skins and non-structural items, but like I said, for this I wouldn't trust it to hold it. But for what we're doing now that we have all those MIG welds underneath, it's gonna work out really well and look almost factory. Again, we epoxy the inside of the cowl panel. Anyone that looks in there and sees the amount of coverage in there is going to automatically know the car's been worked on. But like I said, it's certain things like that that we're doing that touches to just replicate what the factory did. With the rocker panel, you could see we installed our rocker panel. Tacking up the rear corners, I want them to line up the best. And like I said, this rocker panel's been test fit, cut down, obviously, a bunch of times. So everything fits really well. After we get done tacking the corners, you see I'm going to clamp the top and the bottom of the rocker. Now, if you watch other videos and installs of mine, I like to set the lower rocker height up or down on the door jamb height, and basically screw in the rocker till we get our door jambs in there to basically close the gap. These Mopars are notorious for a really wide door gap in the bottom. With this car though, we're working off the factory rocker on the other side, and most of this rocker's in this side. We can't do that, so we're kind of stuck in the factory location, but I think it'll look good. We'll go back through once we fit the doors, and I think everything will be okay. I did MIG weld all the holes I drilled out that you saw on the rocker panel. It's the same process. And then just for the sake of looking factory and being stronger, we're going to go back through with the spot welder with the higher amperage because the two panels are thicker, and we're going to go spot weld everything. We're now going to turn our attention to our door skins. You see I got a passenger side door skin laid out on some padding to make sure it doesn't get damaged while we're working on it. And I take the door frame and you see I'm kind of just putting it down over it and fitting it in place. I'm then taking a couple screws and I'm putting it on the bracket on the inside. On some of these door panels, on the other one, you'll see that bracket actually fell off. It wasn't welded on good enough, but this one stayed on. We sandblasted it, and that's how we did it. If you want to see a detailed information about how to install exactly what this car is, it was a 73 at the time, but 73, 70, all the E-body door panels for the most part, the door skins are the same process. So go back and check it out. 1973 door skins. I go over installing a Dynacorn door skin on a video and an AMD because both parts manufacturers only had one version of the door skin. So I show the difference between them and I go in really in depth. Right now, this is a quick time-lapse version of that same exact process and how it's just done just for this car build and just seeing the whole car come together. But you see, once we got the door skin happy positioned where we want it on the door frame, we're going to go ahead and I'm taking a hammer. It's a flat hammer, if you could see, so it's not stretching and rolling all the way around, so it's actually a door skinning hammer, and I'm hitting it with a block underneath not to bend the door skin. Once I get it about 90% down, you see I have this pneumatic door skinning tool, so I could just run through it real lightly and let it do all the work, and it really just creates a very unified seam folding. It looks factory in the grand scheme of things. This won't do curves, so you see right now I'm going to go through the curve areas and just tap them down with the hammer and the metal dolly. I think with the main thing with door skinning and how to make it come out really nice is just focus on your backside. You just want to make sure the door skin, the external skin, isn't being damaged by your dolly. So you want good solid pressure on there and you're easing it down with a hammer. This is a multi-step process. Now you can see right there, that was that bracket I was talking about. You can put that bracket on after door skin's installed. What I do, there's a center rectangle hole there. I try to line up and you could kind of see where it goes on the grooves. If you're ripping your old door skins apart, take a look at it and just take a mental note, whether it's a Chevrolet, whether it's a Mopar, whether it's a Ford, just take a look where everything goes. The process on skinning the doors is pretty similar, but you can see right now, like I said, I got a metal dolly. I'm working the edges in first. I'm not hitting down, so I'm using the one side of the hammer, hitting in, kind of rolling the edges down, and then I'm switching right now to a wooden dolly. The wooden dolly is less aggressive on the back as I'm hitting down on the door skin folded edges. So my buddy Dave made this, so shout out to him for making that wooden dolly. I use that on all my door skinning tools. I really like it. It's kind of, he made it custom fit for me about how I wanted the curvatures and everything. And like I said, if you get a piece of wood, something that's not going to dent it, I think a dolly pushing up and then hitting down into it has a greater chance of doing more damage on this instances. You could see on the corners where I really want to get the corners down, like I was saying, I go back to the metal dolly, and then like I said, once we're down enough, we take our door skinning tool just like the same thing on the other process and just rip right down it. Like I said, the curvatures, we'll have to come back through it. I'm kind of working in on the angle. With that door skinning tool, you also want to make sure not rolling it into the door, having that dig a gouge into it. So you kind of want to roll it out, make sure it's following the curvature, and again, not hurting the inside of the door. Working the corners a little bit more. Once we get done and we're happy where the whole door skin's clamped into place, that bracket, we have rosette holes drilled into it. So you can see right now, I'm going to go back through and just weld it with the MIG welder. I have done in the past where I spot weld them on beforehand and then install them onto the car one time. I don't think there's a right way, wrong way. There's multi ways to doing it. So I just chose on this car, since once I was MIG welded, we're going to MIG weld both sides. And then you see on the edges on the front, I'll sit there and spot them, just do a stitch weld on it just to hold those edges because it's kind of hard. There's not enough meat on them. It's designed that way. If you take it apart, you'll see the factory doors are also stitch welded in there. So the final step on what I like to do is, now we folded our edges, we got to make sure those edges don't come unfolded. And how you're going to do that is you're either going to put some rosette holes in them and then just spot them in a couple corners. You'll see when you remove the factory door skin, there's a couple spot welds, and then they are single-sided because obviously we can't use the squeezing motion on the outside of a door skin. So this is the same exact process. We take the single side, I put the good ground on it, and we're just going to squeeze the trigger, and we're putting a single side spot weld to make sure this edge does not fold back up. It's going to be the same exact process that the factory did. Obviously the factory only did 4, I think, on each side or something. We've done a lot more on this car, no big deal. What we're going to do right here, we're just getting ready to seal everything up in epoxy primer before we install anything. I'm going to go around the door edges, everything I just worked on that's bare metal, we're going to seal in the epoxy primer. So we're using an Omni MP170, a gray epoxy primer. This is the same stuff we used on the firewall going to and the lower portion of the cowl. We're just now, like I said earlier, we're going to spray the whole thing and just seal it up and clean it out. Wax and grease remover is a good key to start everything. I used it on the last one. I don't think I showed it on the video, but we're going to lay 2 coats on this whole car, 2 good heavy coats, and you can see right now I'm just trying to cover everything, trying to keep a slight overlap, keep a wet edge, just following all procedures you would that if you were doing base coat, clear coat, show quality job. You know, we're always trying to practice and get to be the best at any part of this process as we can. So anytime I take the paint gun out, same thing, I just try to get good coverage, not make any runs, and just pretend, like I said, I'm trying to lay down a show winning paint job. What I'm going to do for the inside of this firewall is I'm going to do 2 coats like the outside. The first coat is just going to be on the firewall, and I did scuff up the toe boards a little bit, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my second coat and run it over the toe boards just to clean everything up and make it look nicer. It's good when one part of the car is just in one color and you could see everything, so we'll just blend it out into the toe boards, and when we're done, this car should look really good. So now we got the door skins on the door frames itself. We're going to go ahead and install them on the car just to make sure there's no issues, everything fits. And that's going to be the base that I build the front and the back of the car off of. So bolting these on the car, the main thing what I like to do, I like to align them off the front of the rocker to the edge of the door jamb. Then I like to make sure we're straight across the front. A lot of times what I'll do is we'll get the 2 bolts in. We have a lot more to do, and I leave the profile bolts loose till I'm done getting the height set, and then we'll adjust the profile off the rocker. But we like to get the bolts in there, and you see right now I'm just taking a pry bar underneath the front, and I like to get the front gap set and then tighten the bottom corner down, and then I'll move to the back of the door. Once that's set, after setting the front profile, then we'll go ahead and lift the back of the door up and down as we're tightening the top of the bolt. This really helps out. All right, we'll go ahead and start wrapping up the video on the 70 Challenger with the doors, the firewall, the cowl panel, the rocker panel, everything that you saw in the last 25-30 minutes that we've installed. So you see right now the doors are on the car with the door skins. You can see the outside came out really good. I'm really happy with them. They're smooth. They usually do need a little bit of work in this bottom corner. So when we hit that point, the Challengers curve a little bit and these door skins like to square off there. But when we hit that point, we're looking really good because that means everything else is on the car. What I did with the doors when we installed them, actually we only have 2 bolts in these door hinges. The owner we're going to use his original hardware, and I have them in one of those electric tumblers with the beads that kind of clean up all the bolts. So I had these bolts just laying around just to put them in there. So we'll put the right hardware in there down the road. This was just to get the doors on the car and test fit for the most part. So the doors are squared off the front rocker right now. They're level across the bottom with a good door gap, and in general back here we're lined up. So that's how I'm kind of centering the door, since there's nothing else to go off on this car. So going over what we did on this video one more time, looking at the inside, you could see we've sealed everything off with 2 coats of epoxy primer. We kind of went down on the floor, like I said, a little bit more and blended everything out. That's going to give us a good uniform look to everything where we can see any imperfections. That's why I like to get this car in one color if we can, because anything that we do, any scratches, anything that's wrong on the car, when it's one color, it really stands out. Turning our attention to the upper cowl panel and firewall, Firewall, you see up here, same thing. Everything is smooth. Everything has 2 coats on it. It's spot welded with as many places that we can spot weld, and got everything just dialed in. We fixed these 2 side pieces on both sides where the doors bolt on, so they're really solid, and now there's going to be no area for water to get in there, especially when we add seam sealer down the road. We also seam sealed under the cowl panel, which you saw, and just looking at the front is Firewall, you could see we put our spot welds back in, and they look somewhat factory as best we can. So now that you see what we did, I'm very happy with how this car is looking. It looks really good at this point. We are not gonna touch the outside structure as far as, we're gonna leave all this in the E-coat until we get most of this body put on, if not all the body, and I'll do the exterior skins one time after we're done gapping and final touching the car, knowing we have more modification. It's easy to get to the outside skins, whereas the inside of these areas, that's why we're doing them now. Same thing, all this will be covered by fenders and everything. So the next step and the next process on the video, we're gonna work on the front end of this car. You could see, obviously we're missing a lot up here. The next video, this thing should start really looking like a 70 Challenger with the fenders, the inner structure, everything else. You might think that's a little different. I do it different than most people I've seen. Actually, I haven't seen anyone do it. And the reason being, I'll go over on the next video why we go that way versus, everyone says start with the quarters and work your way forward for alignment, but it's worked in the past. I'll show you on the next video why I do that and how it works for us. Hopefully you like this video on the 70 Challenger. Again, it's looking really good. It's finally starting to see the first signs of a Challenger, so really cool that we hit this point. We're going to bring you another video when we do the front end, like I said, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully it'll be pretty soon. I'm going to go ahead and what I end up doing, I test fit the whole car, especially in the front end, kind of get our marks, everything I did with this one. We test fit everything first, then we pull it apart, make our marks, and strip it, and that's when I do the recording, just so you're not watching me fight this car for an extra 20 minutes or so on the video, that everything looks like it just goes together. So there's some of the inside camera editing tricks that they always don't go together as easy as it looks on the video. You do have to pull, pry, twist, and whatever you got to do. So stay tuned. We're going to put out some more videos on this car. We do have other projects. I'm kind of hit or miss on what we're going to do and put out on those. But if you like our channel, please subscribe to it. It really helps us out. If you like the videos, please leave a comment, and we're open for feedback on ways to make things better. And I'm Rick from Carthage Classic Cars, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.